Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's episode of Ramblemancy. I feel like I was going to follow that up with something, but there's no words in my brain. So,
The
hi,
sh the show where we try to throw a lasso around. Wait, hold on. We did that bit
welcome to
separately. So
Wrangle. Yeah, I'll do the Henry Nolan intro. Welcome to Wrangle Nancy, the show where we try to throw a lasso around Pelosi. Okay. Anyway, what's up, everybody?
Oh
We-
gosh, good call, yo.
Freeman's already tired. Uh,
No.
I
I listen. The poll is very good. We
it's
have
a great.
villains question mark,
Yeah.
pass, smash, a secret third thing, and a legendary slow burn.
I went for a secret third thing. That's mine. Yeah, secret third thing. Um, very good poll. Um, anyway,
Um,
yes, as you may have guessed, tonight we're talking about villains. Villainous characters across all forms of media. Perhaps playing villainous characters in TTRPGs, running villainous characters in TTRPGs, all that kind of good stuff. We're going to be talking about it tonight because we realized recently that the last time I think we talked about villains was back when we were doing in-person Ramblemancies. I'm
mhm.
pretty sure. So it's
Yeah.
been a hot minute. Anyway, welcome everyone. The only announcements as usual thus far are that Tomorrow's Dead season 2 is currently airing live on YouTube Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific time. I believe there are only 3 episodes left because we just had episode 9 air. So I believe there are only 3 episodes left before the end. So yeah, very excited for y'all to see that. So that is happening, and over the course, we've teased this already, but over the course of the next couple of months, we're going to be rolling out changes to our Patreon to reflect the changes to our channel. That will be happening
Yeah.
soon, beginning with the world building tier. World builders will get their sort of changes first. You'll still notice them. We'll send out emails, notifications, all that kind of good stuff, so that you know what's going on with that. Um, so yeah, that we be looking for an update and like a telling you what's going on with that sometime in the next week or so. Um, but yeah, that's it. That's all we got. Tonight, in a historic moment in Ramblemancy, Lucas does not throw John under the bus because Lucas has a question. I have a
Oh
question for
shit.
all of you. I know, plot
Oh,
twist. Just like the villain reveal, it's a
oh.
plot twist.
Plot
Um,
twist this early on. Oh, baby.
it turns out I was the bus the whole time. No, anyway,
Dun dun dun.
here's my question for you all. Favorite or no, maybe that's not how I want to frame it. Let's put it this way, and you can interpret this however you want. Most controversial villain.
Most controversial villain. Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
most controversial villain. See, there's a lot of ways that I can take that. Villain that has caused the most controversy. Absolutely, Joaquin Phoenix is the Joker. Uh, just because I'm so like the number of people who are like he's an anti-hero. I'm like, no, he's a bad person. You should not see anything of yourself really in the Joker, except maybe that like little part of every human being that's like, what if you just fucking insert do bad thing here, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know, that part
Mm-hmm.
of you exists to be like, oh, what if you did it? So that the rest of you can go, no, bad idea,
Yeah.
right?
Um.
It's
Uh,
not to be listened to.
Chance, I will. Hi, by the way. I am leaving the interpretation of this question up to you. Um. I'm just curious what people have to say. Nico said Walter White. Okay. Okay.
Walter
Um.
White is a fantastic answer to that
And feel
question.
free to explain how in what way you believe them to be controversial because I'm curious about these answers as well. Um oh god, I had one but it has escaped me. All of my energy went to
Oh,
thinking of and presenting the question.
No, I'm just thinking about Walter White now because I actually watched all of Breaking Bad with my stepmom and my mom and my stepdad way around.
Oh,
Um,
Nico says Walter White's the same as John just said. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting problem specifically around like I think a perfect example of it is Breaking Bad of people not
mhm.
recognizing the difference between protagonist and good guy.
Yeah,
And that's
in
Sure.
some ways the character, like the way that the show is framed from the jump is that you're supposed to be rooting for Walter. And everybody else around Walter is trying to sabotage him. And then the farther
Hmm.
into the show you get, the more that you're rooting genuinely for Jesse and going, get away from Walter, buddy. Get
yeah,
away, bud. Like, so it's really it is interesting.
yeah,
Um, that guy
yeah.
is super destructive. Um,
Let's see. I think it's not. It probably isn't my like. Oh no, I got it. I've got mine. I've got mine. You ready for this one?
yeah, yeah, hit me.
Negan.
Oh
Because there's
God.
so, and the reason I say Negan is controversial is because there's so many people who are like, God, I hate that character, but they mean like they hate the character in the at like the show and not in the way that you're intended to hate the character because he's like a bad guy. But
Hmm.
also because I was here for the Negan redemption arc, and a lot of people just couldn't get past the like horrific shit that he's done in the past, and they're like, why would you even try to redeem this villain? And I was like, I'm for it because the way that they, and specifically the reason I'm for it is because of the way that they played it out. At no point does Maggie forgive Negan. At no point are his past sins like washed away in the like, oh, you're a good guy now. It's like at no point does that happen. He is a different person at the end of The Walking Dead than he was when he was
True.
first introduced, and I would say even a redeemed character. But that didn't mean that everybody else forgave him, and I think that right there, I think was like, so that's why I say, for me, Negan is the most controversial villain.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Odds and ends coming in swinging, or like just right over home plate here with Kylo Ren.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
That was the one
also
that I was
being
gonna say because that's the only one that was in my head when I like until I remembered Negan. But yeah,
yeah. I feel like Kylo Ren is also a pretty good like controversial villain here. But a part of it, I think we've talked about. I think even as recently as the time we talked about Star Wars on the channel, I think part of the reason that Kylo Ren is a controversial villain is mostly because um, those movies struggle in the writing department, and
yeah.
Kylo Ren's character, I think, wanted to be like executed differently than the way that it was.
I think one of the other reasons that he was controversial is because everybody thought when you have like the bad guy has to be ultra competent and really just like they all have to be Darth Vader basically. Um, but honestly, I think that that Kylo Ren being sort of a whiny kid, I think it worked. I think it was good. The whole point is that he's like a pale imitation of Darth Vader. Like that's the whole point of that character, that he is an angsty kid.
Mm.
That's the whole point of that character. Like
Mm-hmm.
angsty whiny kid doesn't mean he is less capable of doing evil. In fact, it makes him more capable of doing evil, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah. Um
Ooh.
Try to critique them when you aren't able to just think of the way he was presented, but also the writers and stuff behind the scenes. Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I think sorry, Freeman, did you have one that you were going to say or
Those are really good. Uh, I haven't watched a whole lot of Loki, but from what of my understanding of the show, it makes me think that maybe Loki would be a good one.
interesting? I don't know about controversial. But
Okay, controversial.
yeah.
Okay.
But like a
Um.
good, I think I agree with you that Loki is
Hmm.
a good villain. He's also a good like anti-hero.
Hmm.
Loki's
Yeah,
a great
that's one of them.
anti-hero actually, but yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it is kind of fun to have a protagonist that will just disintegrate a guy. and not agonize over it, but also not in like the DC universe way. Like I think actually anything I would say beyond that point is just belaboring the and not agonize over it. Like, you know,
Yeah.
Loki's not exactly the most heroic dude ever, but he
He'll
is
he will save people, but he's not happy about it. He's like pretty mad about it actually. He's like, ugh, fine.
It would be better if you guys could figure this out, but unfortunately I have the power to save you.
Guess I have to do it again because I'm so wonderful and magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
And you are but lowly worms who wouldn't survive one day without my intervention.
Which is a fun pivot from I should actively rule all of you. You know,
What were you
it
thinking,
feels still
Freeman?
true to the character.
What were you thinking, Freeman?
Huh?
Did you come up? Did you have one?
I don't think I do, because
Okay.
but the before Loki, the one I came up with is, I'm sorry, in Marvel right now. Was Magneto, but
Oh, okay.
Were we talking about him the other day in the staff meeting earlier this
we
week?
may have been.
I don't think
No,
so.
we weren't.
Okay, it was
That's
there
your other
was
staff meeting.
my what's your oh shit, I've outed myself. I'm cheating. Live on the internet. It was a Discord call earlier this week where I
Huh.
think no. I was playing I was just playing Destiny with a couple of friends, and one of them said something to the effect
Oh.
of Magneto they redeemed because they realized more and more it was hard to disagree, like say what you will about the man's methods, it was hard to like disagree with the sentiment behind them.
Look, here's
Yeah, that's
John.
true.
I think you might remember that, like back in college, in sort of that last year, I had this whole thing where I was like, "Oh my god, superheroes are just propaganda for the establishment."
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that revelation.
I was like, "Oh my god, the thing that villains want is to create social change because they've been on the receiving end of like the corruption of society, and all they want to do is create social change. Their methods are questionable, but the superheroes defeat them because their methods are questionable, but then they don't change anything. They just bring everything back to the status quo." Oh no.
Oh God.
The win condition for superheroes is just a return to normal. Ah.
You're just like, oh God, superheroes are cops. And
Yeah.
then Callisto 6 comes along, and
Yeah.
and Eric Campbell and the gang are very punk about their superheroes.
Callisto 6 comes along and goes, "Your corporation is bullshit." Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. Magneto. I'm very glad that Brian made that comment about comics earlier this week. Made that comment. The win condition for comic writers is a return to the status quo. Yeah.
yeah,
Magneto is one of my favorites.
that's a good one. That's a really good one. Yeah, and like, it is
Also,
funny
Sir
how,
Ian, of course.
of course,
Ah.
Sir Ian McKellen.
Yeah. I think this is also getting, I think that point in particular gets a little bit at what makes a good villain. And what makes a good villain, I think, is that they are not like, what makes a compelling, interesting villain to me, I think, is someone where like there's part of you that wants that like wants to see what they're doing in some kind of positive light. Like there's you're like somewhere in here, like you're not entirely wrong about something, right? It's not just like the mustache twirly, like I'm going to explode all of the suns at once and end the entire universe. Like yes,
Because
that's
I think
bad.
it's fun. Yeah,
Like those villains are like primal, like evil forces have their places in storytelling. But like I think a lot of compelling villains are the ones, as we've been discussing, that are trying to enact change in a way that is destructive
Yeah.
or
Well,
you know,
I
harmful.
recently just rewatched Legend of Korra, and like you look at what the villains fundamentally want in those. Although you can make the argument that that's not the case with Amon, and also we're not going to talk about Unalaq, um, but like
Mhm.
Amon, at least in terms of what he presented, uh, in reality he just wanted control. But what he presented was equality, right? Like that was his whole platform was equality, which is, fundamentally I think a good thing. With Zahir, he wanted freedom, right? Like a release from tyranny, right? And Kuvira wanted order, right? Peace and order, right? But like the thing that made those villains interesting and compelling was the fact that they had those ideals. Amon again, arguably, um, but then like the methods that they employed to achieve them were just like, yeah, like not good. That's the thing that made them a villain. But yeah, yeah, it's an interesting one. Purple Man from Jessica Jones is a very, very good. I think it's okay that we move away from controversial villains if we want to now, because like
Mhm.
controversial is a hard one. That's why I started with it, because like um that's a tough thing. But like we can just talk generally about like villains and villainous things. Um,
Yeah,
Coops.
like Kate said, the
Yeah.
best villains are ones whose perspective on life makes sense as to why they think that way. Someone like Nurse Ratched is just trying to do her job.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we've been circling around here is um, a good villain is one who, if you zoom out to like high level principles, you can almost agree, like, or you can agree with that, like with what they're doing, or what not with what they're doing, but with what they
Yeah.
with parts of what they believe, which is
Yeah.
again how they get
Mm-hmm.
minions or following or whatever, like people to circle like around Amon and the I have just the name of that group has I have forgotten the name of who he led in Legend of Korra.
Who? Which who?
Amon
Oh, the
was in
Equalists.
charge of yeah the Equal.
Oh,
I was
right.
like,
I
this is a blatantly obvious name that I'm just like too sleepy to remember right now.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, again,
Yeah. No,
equality's
it's interesting, and like, uh, yeah. No, that's. I think it is interesting because like I don't necessarily think what was I watching recently where like the villain was like you could where it was like under like the villain's position was understandable and even to some degree empathetic, but like the villain himself was not. And I'm trying to think of who it was, what I was watching recently, because I think that's a hard balance to keep. Because sometimes if you stray too far, and I've had this problem in my like making NPCs and like villains in TTRPGs, where I think a problem that I have had a lot, and I think Freeman, might have been part of this conversation when we were talking about this. Like I tend to get into my villains' heads way too much to the point where they become almost all of my villains end up being redeemable villains, and that I don't always want that to be the case. Like I do
Got
too
it.
good of a job of like making their position and like their causes empathetic, but I think that not all villains have to have that. Like it's a hard balance to keep of having their position be one where you can be like, yeah, okay, I could get behind that, but then they themselves just being
Of
like
course.
not. I'm trying to think of. I cannot for the life of me remember what it was that I was watching that like had a villain that was
hmm.
written that way.
Star Wars? Bad Batch?
No, no,
Because that's that wouldn't no.
I don't know. I can't remember. I truly can't. Um, yeah, no, I can't remember at all. But yeah,
The thing I love about how they wrote the Purple Man is how they show us that his upbringing, with his upbringing, there's basically no way for him to turn out good. The only time he has ever does anything verging on good or selfless is when the woman he has a crush on forces him to.
yeah, Yeah.
Also, Chan's earlier said I had to think about this, and I think I'd go with Maleficent, making a baby sleep indefinitely because she didn't get invited to a birthday party.
Yeah.
Oh, whoa,
Yeah.
yeah. I was gonna go in the Disney direction too, and
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about that as well. It's fun.
Oh, yeah, good point, Nico. That's not what I was thinking of, but that's a good example of that. The flag bearers from Captain America and the Winter Soldier. Yeah, that isn't what I was thinking of, but that is a
Hmm.
really good example of that. Um, man, I
Oh,
truly cannot, for the life of me,
which ones are the
remember.
flag bearers? They're
Um, Everyone had such beautiful, in-depth ideas, and I went with someone so petty. No, that was great. I think that's excellent. Because the thing is, I think sometimes it's okay for villains to be just sort of a little bit capricious and like, just just doing things because of like going like, here is the minor slight or inconvenience. Here is my response to it. Like that's, I think that's
well,
totally okay.
and Maleficent. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is in a lot of stories portrayed as like a witch or a fae or something like that. Like it vaguely like fae kind of coded character. And if there's one thing we've ever learned from Irish folklore, it's don't piss off fairies.
Yeah.
Um, she's fae. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like Smashers.
Like Smashers. Yeah, that's the group that has
I don't
the
remember that.
it's the one with like that's the group that like is led by like the redheaded girl.
Hmm.
Oh
I forget the
yeah.
actress's name and I forget the character's name. Oh, I think the
What?
character's name is like Carly or something like that, isn't
Oh,
it?
Carly. Never mind. I'm way off.
Isn't it? I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's Carly. It's
Yeah,
Carly.
I
Looking at it
forget
right
that. I
now.
always forget that actress's name though. Which is crazy because she's awesome and she's in like a lot of stuff, and I don't know how I keep forgetting her name. But yeah, um, yeah, no, man, that's gonna bother me that I can't remember what it was. It was very recent that I saw. But yeah, no, they're like I think that's an important balance to keep because like, and one that in TTRPGs don't keep very well a lot of the time. Like only recently in our current campaign did I introduce a villain that like is absolutely irredeemable, like unreasoning evil, right? Like,
Hmm.
but it is like that is a it is a creature that was created. Like I think the key to having those like unreasoning evil villains is that they are not the main villain, right? There's someone who maybe serves the main villain.
Hmm.
Like a good
Yeah.
example being what's his face in The Princess Bride, the
Oh,
six
the
fingered man.
six-fingered man, Count
Yeah,
Rugen.
Count Rook. Yeah, that one. He's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, he's a good example of that. Like, but I think those villains are only compelling when they are in service to the actual main villain, because otherwise it becomes a little unbelievable. But it is very believable to think that there is a guy, like one person who is following this other guy because he knows that it'll give him an opportunity to hurt people, and like there's something compelling like narratively about that character.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, for sure. It's hard, I think, when it comes to villains. I think it's difficult to sustain a villain when if it is just like a force of nature or like like an elemental thing. And I think that
mm-hmm.
like the Count Rugen kind of character falls under that. You can't sustain interest in somebody who's just super evil,
Yeah,
because it becomes difficult to like suspend your disbelief and be like, yeah, lots of people would follow this guy who loves to, checks notes, torture people
mm-hmm.
for fun,
Yep.
you
I
know.
agree. I agree, Nico. My favorite villain archetype is the one that's genuinely loved by their followers. I think that is like the villain who commands loyalty, and like I think who commands loyalty and even devotion from their followers. I think is one of my favorite villain archetypes. Um, the person that comes to mind,
Hmm. Yeah, I
I
was just
think,
gonna ask for an example, honestly.
yeah, I can think of a bunch of them. The problem is they're so like niche that to bring them up as an example would be useful to nobody. Um, I feel like I'm missing an extremely obvious one, but
Hmm.
why can't I think of these? My brain is just not working today, y'all. It's just not
I
happening.
know.
I have
I'm
so
like,
much like energy, but none of it is going up here. Like I'm very awake, but my brain is like, all right, body, you got this. You can handle this. I'm gonna check out. Um, oh God, yeah, Nico, do you have an example? Um, oh yeah, the guy in Supernatural heals people's cancer, but is also stealing their life. Yeah, that's a good example. I'm trying to think
Wow,
of like,
forgotten about that.
yeah, me too. Um, this Silco from
ooh,
Arcane is a good
Silco.
example.
Yeah, Silco from Arcane, I think, is a really, really good example of this.
Ooh.
We, the audience, can look at Silco and be like, "This is a bad dude."
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but then you
Hmm.
set yourself in the world that Riot has built around Silco,
Hmm.
and you're like, I understand why this guy commands devotion.
I was just.
Actually,
That's
a
good.
good example of my earlier thing, right? The villain who's like, no, never mind. It's not a good example. It's actually the opposite. Never mind. I'll come back to that. Man, I'm trying to think. Oh. Nope. Never mind. It's gone.
I totally forgot about the Silco one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a brief. I'm watching the show again, so I'm like shocked that that one didn't fly out of my mind right
Yeah.
now.
Oh God. Um.
God,
No, not that one.
sorry.
Um. This one's debatable whether she falls into this category or not. But Azula.
Oh
Ooh,
Like I
God.
know Azula mostly likes to rule through fear, but there she also inspires a certain amount of admiration in the people who follow her.
Hmm.
Like I don't know if this is a perfect example of this kind of villain, but I think Azula is like at least a like sort of an okay example of this because I think she does inspire a certain amount of admiration in her followers.
I think Azula is also a case of a villain where, yeah, she is kind of objectively a villainous character in the context of a story, but it is also deeply
yeah.
tragic that she's a villain. It's not a character
Yeah.
like Negan that you love to hate. Um,
Yeah.
you kind of like hate Azula for a season or so, and then or like and then you get into the final season of Avatar, and you can't do anything, especially once you're an adult watching this show, but feel real bad for this
Hmm.
kid.
Yeah. And Nico, I almost said Zahir. Actually, yeah, Kuvira is a perfect example. Kuvira is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Better than Azula. Um, Zahir, I almost said, except I think the thing with Zahir is that I don't think it's about the Red Lotus. Their devotion is to their cause, not to Zahir. Like some of them, sure, like, but they kind of you never get the sense that they're like, oh, we follow Zahir because we love him. It's more like we love him because he's our friend and we're devoted to each other, but we're all equally devoted to the cause. And so like I almost said Zahir, but not quite. But I also almost said Zahir as being the opposite of the thing I said earlier, where you have like a sympathetic cause and an unsympathetic villain. Zahir is the opposite of that, where like you have like his cause, like not just like the freedom from tyranny thing, but specifically what he defines as tyranny is like that's just civilization, my guy. That's not that's you're
Right.
describing civilization. Um but like
It's
Zahir
that line
himself
from
is a pretty sympathetic character, or at least a likable character, right? Especially when you see in his tender moments with Pali and like the way that he like interacts with his friends and followers. Like they're yeah. Hmm?
had a sneeze, just like
In the chamber, but goes
yeah,
blank.
chambered it up, and then just nothing happened. I even hit the mute button in time.
Well,
Kate says,
salute anyway.
"Thank you." It'll probably just blast me the instant I start, like, I lose focus and start talking to somebody. But Kate said, I think Firefly in that sense, all the villains are only truly villains because our position, our all the information we get is filtered through
Right.
the main characters who are sort of objectively like Robin Hooding around the galaxy.
Yeah. You know what's weird? Okay, so this is an interesting. This is a little bit of beef that I have, not with Firefly, but with commentary that I've seen very interesting that I've seen recently. I've seen people saying like, "Oh, Firefly is just us getting to sympathize with ex-Confederates," and I'm like, I don't think that's what that was about. I was like, first of all, slavery was never part of the question of all of this. Um, Secondly, I think it's much more similar to like if the U.S. lost the Revolutionary War, not the Civil War.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not. It's
Yeah.
less of a the only, and I think the only reason it gets equated to the Civil War is because of the Western aesthetic.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But
That makes.
I think it's much
yeah.
more similar to like the U.S. losing, like the America losing the Revolutionary War.
Yeah. Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
That was the vibe I was getting.
Because I've seen people
Yeah.
dismissing Fireflies, being like, "Oh, they're just getting us to sympathize with like ex-Confederate like analog," and I'm like, that's not what's happening here."
They were looking for something.
I know.
They were looking for something to
I was
just
like, I
like be
don't-
mad about for nothing.
Yeah, I was like, first of all, there's a very important part of the Civil War that wasn't part of the Firefly conflict,
Yeah.
and it's a little thing called slavery.
Just a little.
That was just a tiny little detail that you might have missed there.
Oh, fuck. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
That's
brain is broken. I can't believe I did not hear about that at all. I have not seen that discourse at all.
I haven't seen it a lot, but I have seen that commentary go about, and it's just, yeah.
Insert blinking man emoji. Listen, sometimes I go
Listen.
on the internet and I read takes, and then I just need to close the entire browser and go outside and touch grass on the behalf.
Listen to me. Listen. My that's enough internet for the day moments are coming earlier and earlier in the day.
Oh.
Yeah. If it's Western, it's okay.
Yeah.
This is we've talked. We've talked about this before on this channel, and it is one of my like just huge pet peeves as a student.
This is me
of literature.
planting 2 flags on this hill. 2 flags on this hill.
Like you can't just look at a single aspect of something and decide that wholesale is always 100% of the time a dog whistle for this specific bad thing and then purge it.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, first of all, you're homogenizing your media, right? You're depriving yourself of a number of like sort of fundamental experiences, right? But also, like you're just saying like, no, we're going to bury our head in the sand and not ever think about that again. And that's you have to be able to engage with media critically. And if you see Western and you're like, that means they've got fucking Confederate flags on their pickup trucks.
It's like, oh, these guys were part of a rebellion that like failed, and now they're still mad about it many years after it's happened. Must be Confederates.
Yeah, they must be American Confederate. They must be Texans.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry to the Texans in chat.
It's just, yeah. I thought I had more to add to that, but no, like that's pretty much it. That is the thing. Yeah.
Please turn your brain on when you are critiquing media. I don't like this. This makes me uncomfortable. Great, perfect, all valid things. Interrogate those. Western aesthetic bad. That it can't be a complete sentence.
Yeah.
You want to talk about a lot of the problems of Western, like the Western aesthetic from like the colonialism and like all of that
Yeah, look,
bundle of
that
nonsense. Like
if I could
that's a
point to, if I could
whole
point to
ass topic.
one thing that is the bad guy in Firefly, it's colonialism. Firefly
Yeah.
is like colonialism is the bad guy in Firefly. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah. So
I
yeah.
wish I had seen Ted Lasso yet. What do you mean we should have media
Oh, I
literacy?
legitimately saw somebody say that media literacy is a made up term for people who like and want like something I don't know, it's like a made up term or something like that. Yeah, that it's not a real thing, that there's no such thing as media literacy. And I'm like
No. No way.
I cannot imagine a scenario where somebody could have missed the point more.
Yeah.
Could have totally
Ah,
missed it. Like I read that and I was like, oh no.
Like, hmm.
I'm becoming less and less
We're back to the
surprised.
blinking man emoji.
Yeah.
I love
So
that. I use that emoji a lot.
So here's the takeaway from today's Ramblemancy so far, just to recap. Firefly is a Civil War analog, and where it frames the Confederates as good guys, and also media literacy is not real. That's the takeaway from Ramblemancy for today. Uh, God,
Also,
please don't take that out of
having a
context.
having a
This
having
is
a joker
Right,
satire.
that's what
profile
happens.
pic.
This is
The internet
satire.
does,
I'm making a
Lucas.
joke.
That's what it does.
I know.
It
This is a
is
joke.
out of- It is.
And just to
Absolutely.
complete the little package of three
Right.
things, having a Joker profile pic makes you a better person.
Correct. Yeah.
Well,
I can't
I'm
do
signing off.
that. Yeah, lacking media literacy is one way to get pulled in by things like propaganda. Exactly, Cam.
Yes,
Exactly.
Mhm.
it's again, it's one of the things that it's one of for a lot of reasons. It's one of the things that I oh, this is such an interesting topic because I taught a lot of English classes in middle school and high school for a few years. From like 2015 to like 2019ish, like into like 2020, the early pandemic. And God, the media literacy like units or classes were just piss fucking poor. They were so bad, and it was why one of the big things that I tried to talk about in my student teaching and when I was working with English classes was like you have to like it is so critically important, especially now more than ever, for you to look at where a source comes from, because this is a lesson that I got extensively when I was a kid, when I was having to go into the library and pull them off of shelves, and I was learning what's the difference between getting autobiographical information versus biographical information versus an encyclopedia, and
Yeah.
all of these have different implicit biases, where they're like, go on the internet and find information, cite your sources. And so like,
Yeah.
you know, you can when you start stratifying things down to like just oversimplifying, like grossly oversimplifying things like that, you leave yourself incredibly open to agreeing with people who have very, very dangerous beliefs.
My site.
Yeah.
I'm citing YouTube. YouTube doesn't lie.
YouTube can't
Um,
lie. You can't go on the internet and lie.
is it
The
now,
number.
John? As a teacher, let me ask you this question:
Yeah.
Is it enough citation of sources if I just say some people think, and then say whatever I want? That
No.
counts as citation, right?
I did have to have this conversation with a student when I was doing a week-long stint at a high school. And it was genuinely an interesting conversation, and I was trying to be as impartial as I could as a teacher, because you can't sit down with a child and say, your parents have some takes, kid. But
Yeah.
because it's evident to me that that's what's going on. But what you can do is, when a student is sitting here having to write a persuasive essay, and they were essentially writing about why they felt like charter schools or something like that were the better idea compared to the public education system. And they were like, I'm having a really hard time finding sources. And I was like, okay, well, show me what you found first. And they showed me a bunch of evidence that indicated that like the things that they were arguing for didn't work in terms of increasing student success and like availability of education to the general public. And so I wound up basically just wanting to be like, okay, so what does the information you found say? And they're like, well, it says this, but that's not what I am arguing. I'm like, well, what you've discovered is that the information, the research you've done indicates something different than your thesis. And this is a perfectly normal thing that happens in writing,
It's a
but
feature, not a
that means
bug.
yeah, it means that your thesis should change. Your thesis should change. You
Look,
should
John,
argue whatever the evidence suggests.
you know, because I've ranted to you about this a lot, which is that right there is a perfect illustration of the failure of our education system when it comes to research, because the whole like
Yeah.
so much of my like research stuff was like when it came to my education research papers and things like that. I think I've even talked about this on Ramblemancy before, where like it was prescribed to me as like, all right, do your thesis first and then go find evidence. And I was like, no, that's not how it's supposed to work. Like you're supposed to like pick like I mean, it makes sense to pick a topic that you're going to be like writing about and then go find evidence, and then you should develop your thesis based on the evidence you find.
Right.
Not pick a like what that the fallacy it's called
Yeah.
I think it's called the Texas sharpshooter. Again, sorry Texas, you're getting it. You're really getting it from all
It
angles
really
in this
is.
in this
Really sorry.
Ramblemancy. But it's called the Texas sharpshooter, where you basically
Yeah.
like draw you draw a target around the bullet hole, right? Like you shoot and then you draw a target around the bullet hole. It's like
Yeah. You find the thing that you agree with, and then you just look for the things that
yeah.
back that up.
And
right?
genuinely,
Yeah.
it wasn't. I didn't fully understand what a research paper was supposed to be until I was doing my senior paper, where I realized, oh, I'm doing, I'm doing work. I'm doing research work here, to like find, like to figure out, to learn about this topic, and then the paper is just reporting on what I learned. I'm not trying to like make an argument, find evidence to support my argument, and then just do it. No, I'm like actually and that's exactly what and it completely changed my perspective. And I will reiterate, in my senior year of college is when I learned what research papers are supposed to be for. Yeah. Anyway, this has nothing to do with villains unless you're framing the American education system as a villain, which frankly
There-
I do.
I was gonna ask, and I think that's where I was gonna land as well.
Yeah. I just
Vote locally every time and look up where people stand. Vote
Yeah.
on school board members, vote on city council, vote on local judges. All of that kind of stuff filters out into into the immediate.
You know, Nico makes a great point. Why do research when you can have opinions?
Cam said that is impressively
Amazing.
level-headed, John, and I appreciate it. Thank you, first of all. But yeah, like it was very, very difficult for me to, in that moment, just like bite down and be like, this is a teachable moment. Let's do it.
Yeah.
It was very hard for me to like clamp down on the and not just be like, well, that means you're wrong, and you need to change your paper. Like you gotta walk them to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. On the subject of villains, though, I did
Mm.
want to ask this question. What do you all think about like concepts as villains? The conversation about Firefly really kind of got this in my head, because I don't think you can point to anyone specifically who is like some sort of overarching villain for them, right?
No.
But like there are certain concepts that are often like they're fighting against. So like, and more in TTRPGs, I find myself like having the villain, like the actual quote unquote villains, being exemplars of concepts, right? Where like they are just they're just an a personification of a specific concept, like greed or like those kinds of things, right? Like people who are buttholes, the concept of people who are buttholes. Excellent. Yes. Um, we did only get one season, but like I still in that one season, like we didn't really get like there was sort of
I
like the
think
faceless kind of like there's the alliance, but like that was sort of a faceless sort of overarching thing, and I would argue that the alliance is simply like a conceptual like a concrete conceptualization of like the overarching theme of well yeah colonialism basically. So like
yeah, I think like the thing about concepts as villains, and I think I said this earlier, but like concepts as villains really they like to have a face.
mhm.
They like to have a character who is the face for them. Um,
Yeah.
you know.
And actually, odds. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking about Brendan Lee Mulligan and the ongoing joke that capitalism is always the bad guy somehow in all of his actual plays. Capitalism is the bad guy, um, and like
I listen. Art reflects experience.
yeah, but like that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Where like I know, and you're right that like like concepts like to have like concepts as villains like to have a face, and it's true. But yeah, I don't when like there is like the one bad guy which is a concept and like the actual faces of that of like the villainy are just sort of exemplars of that overall kind of thing.
Mhm.
um I don't know, thoughts about this other than
Yeah, I think in those stories it tends to be like as Odds is saying, you tend to be opposing that conflict on a very ground level and like fighting
mm-hmm,
against the effects of it. Like when the villain is a concept, um, as with Firefly or as with the Unsleeping City, what you wind up dealing with is the fallout or the ramifications of it. Like um capital P patriarchy, for instance, doesn't really have a face. Like there's not one person that like the heroes can go and face off against to defeat
mm-hmm,
all of it. Or like I don't know, the Barbie movie is coming to mind here.
mm-hmm.
Um, like or in Dimension 20's like Unsleeping City, the effects of capitalism like around all of the characters, like you have to deal with that. And it's never just like one thing that
Yeah,
you deal with, right? Because
yeah,
when you're fighting, like when the antagonist of a story is like a higher level like concept, when you're talking at a thematic level, you kind of have to filter it down into like, okay, what are the effects of this? And if it's something that big, it has systemic or widespread effects.
right. Well, the thing that comes to mind is like early seasons of Gotham where the villain is corruption, right? Like there are actual villains, but they are
Mhm.
all from that perspective. They all are part of that corruption.
Oh,
They are not the creators of it, but they were, and in fact I would argue they were created by the corruption and then perpetuate it. But like I don't know, I think that's I would argue that in like the early seasons of Gotham, like corruption is like the villain, and then all of the like villains with faces, right? The ones you can identify as like, oh, that's the bad guy, are villains who are themselves exemplars of that corruption. Um, but
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I was actually thinking of the DC universe being a pretty good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Gotham like is this nest of like corruption and like and crime and all of that stuff. But like that there's a lot of different players in that game, and a lot of them have different shticks, and a lot of them have different reasons for being the way that they are. But it all
Mm-hmm.
kind of filters back up to the same. Like, are you dealing with a corrupt cop? Well, the corrupt cop fundamentally, on a high level, is the way he is because of the same reason that the Penguin and the Joker exist. But those three people all have different motivations and like codes of ethics and experiences, but they all filter back upwards to this same problem that Gotham City
Well,
has.
and I
Right?
think this is fundamentally like becoming my issue with like superhero stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, I like superhero media and stuff like that. Not the biggest fan of like Marvel, but like I do like that kind of media. But I do have a fundamental problem with it, which is at the end of the day, because concepts are like and systems are difficult enemies to portray in any sort of satisfying narrative way. It always boils down to beat up the guy who like is an exemplar of those things, and now it's over. Congratulations, we've defeated capitalism, or we've defeated the patriarchy, or we've defeated whatever. Right? It always boils down, and I understand why it has to be that way. Right? From a perspective of like a tight, like narrative arc, but it also is becoming more and more unsatisfying because you're like, there's the part of my brain that's looking at it as like, okay, but this didn't solve any problems. You solved the problem of like this person trying to do the bad thing, TM, but you didn't solve the problem they were trying to solve. So yeah, and like that's what it always kind of comes down to. Um, Yeah, Coops, I agree. I haven't seen the more recent seasons, but the boys did do a good job of that. You're absolutely right. Um,
Still finished
yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. Everyone beat up the Nazi. Meanwhile, nothing changed in the big picture. And as
Yeah.
satisfying as it was, to like that was a great scene. Um, yeah, you're right. Like they beat up the Nazi, and then like there was nothing changed in the grand scheme of things because there was still like she wasn't the problem, and I think that's a good point. I think you're right. I didn't think about the boys in that respect, but so thanks for bringing that up. But yeah, yeah, and so like that's for me one of the reasons why superhero media is becoming more and more unsatisfying,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day it comes down to like it always ends up with these facile like beat 'em up solutions, and where it's like, yeah, the solution to the problem is to beat this guy, and we're going to beat up this guy because he is essentially the sacrificial lamb in which we have poured all of our conception of corruption and tyranny and evil and all this stuff, and we're going to beat him up, and that's going to destroy it all the bad things forever. And it's like well, it
Yeah,
doesn't
like
work that way.
once you reduce the boss's health bar to 0, all of the enemies and problems despawn.
Exactly, yeah.
Um,
No, it disappears and then the bigger health bar shows up. It's like, it's-
then the actual boss fight music starts playing.
yeah.
Yeah, yep.
As an aside, one of my favorite things that a friend said about Philadelphia is that it's a PvP enabled zone. So if you see a health bar appear in your vision, or if you hear fight music, run the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep. Huge health bar that just says capitalism. Oh no. Yeah, exactly.
Uh-oh. Wait, there's so many of them. Ah!
Gritty coming for you. Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
Oh, chances. I feel like Breaking Bad kind of has that vibe because everyone kind of sucks, and it's all for a variety of reasons and circumstances about their life, but not just any one person in general. Yeah,
Mhm.
like again, if you pride is certainly the reason that Walter and even a lot of the other like drug kingpins and stuff in that show are the way that they are. But the
I
spirit of Philly.
I want to go back to something Nico said earlier, which is about, and I'll paraphrase because I'm not going to scroll up right now, but about the like villains having like sort of an equal power level to the heroes, sort of working towards the same goal but with their very like different methods. And I agree. I think that's a very compelling arc because it's a great place to have like the hero and the anti-hero, right? Daredevil is a good example of this with the Punisher, right? Where they're
I was
like,
gonna mention Frank Castle, yeah.
yeah. I think that's a good example. There's also in the CW's Supergirl, there was a season 5, which was a hard season to watch because it hit a little too close to home as far as like the political state of this country.
Oh,
Anyway,
mhm.
the socio-political state of this country. Anyway, um, where like I think Manchester Black, his like wife was an alien and had been killed by like these anti-alien people, but he like teams up with Supergirl, but like he's in it to just fuck them up, and she's in it to like justice and that kind of stuff, right? Like to bring sort of like peace and sort of like equal rights and that kind of stuff to and whatever, like the social justice side of it. Whereas he's like, no, I don't care. They killed my wife. I'm going to kill as many of them as I can. And like eventually they come to blow. Like they work together for a while, but eventually they come to blows because they're just like their methods are fundamentally and ultimately their
Right.
goals are fundamentally incompatible. Even though they're I think that's such a compelling narrative because then you have it's one thing to have the heroes and the villains juxtaposed as like having the same ideals but different methods. It's a totally different thing, and I think more compelling and even more like concentrated when you have like the hero and the anti-hero working towards the same goal but with utterly different ideals. I think that's so like good and compelling, and I think is an even better and more concentrated version of that like juxtaposition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
good.
Chance, that's good. Yeah, I just watched Black Mirror, started watching Black Mirror recently.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, classic Charles and Eric X-Men, exactly. Odds. Yeah. That's another good one. But yeah, I haven't seen any of Black Mirror, mostly because there's a lot of there are a lot of things in Black Mirror that are my would sort of trigger real world anxieties of mine, and that's where
The
I have
whole
yeah
yeah, fair. There's one that just straight up like technology,
mm-hmm
which
yeah
well, not tech I don't know if it's not technology, more like social media, but like that is kind of integrated. It's like connected,
yeah
and it has the whole like how Community does the whole like meow meow beans.
yeah
They're making fun of this one. I think they're making fun of or bringing up this episode with the star. We watched this. No, we didn't.
no not
But we
not
did.
me
Um, but yeah, there's like a
yeah
whole like system of you interact and like everyone gives you a ranking through their like device.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a nightmare.
Chan's is talking about, I think, the same thing that you're talking about right now in chat too, which is that episode that was basically people trying
Yep,
to earn their social standing
that's
with
it.
society and getting
yeah
sucked up into trying to keep those numbers up and then having that fall down. And
Yep,
Salute.
yep.
there it was. Thank you. Found me. And trying to process that, and then
Yes.
it's interesting. It's fascinating, like hearing about that. Like there's a Black Mirror episode on that, and then on the entire other side of the spectrum is reading A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers, and having a scene where a character explains to another character who is a robot that has just come back from the wilderness for the first time in hundreds of years, how their currency system works. And it's not dissimilar to that, but the result of your score being low is not punitive. It's this person must need help, which is such a, like it's just
Hmm.
like it's the difference in genre, right? We're talking about one
yeah
that is a dystopian story like Black Mirror, and then we're
Mm.
talking about more or less a utopia because Becky Chambers' Monk and Robot series is the essential question of it is what does wanting more look like in a world where everyone has what they need?
Right.
And not in the greed sense, but in the I keep doing things and they feel good for a while, but then I just feel empty.
Hmm.
Um,
mm-hmm
which
yeah
whether that's
Wow.
burnout or whether that's like like a searching for purpose. But
mm-hmm
Mm-hmm.
actually, I think that's a really interesting case to bring up because that story, like it is in the almost in the purest sense a utopian society, right? Every person within it has their basic needs met. When people don't have those basic needs met or are struggling, like they are met with like this is like, how can we help you through this, right? Is the response to that. um and so like there's no villain in the story, like no outward villain. The villain, I put in huge scare quotes here, is like this ancient concept of like abuse of the planet or the climate and like one's own self.
Hmm.
Right. I don't know. It's really interesting having a story that doesn't have a villain. Right. In cyberpunk or dystopian stories, the villain is very clear. It's capitalism. Capitalism's the bad guy. But then when you have like a more introspective story like that, it's like, okay, who's the villain? My sense of self-worth. I'm the villain, I guess. Like I'm the bad guy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then you just play My Own Worst Enemy by Lit in the background, just blasting it and just
Yeah. No surprise to me, I am my own worst enemy.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Nico has an interesting question here, which is who do you think is the most underrated or underutilized villain? Right off the top of my head, and I don't think I need to talk about this anymore. Right off the top of my head, Darth Maul. Anyway, moving on.
I know.
Yeah, there's no conversation.
There's no conversation to be had about that one. Like, he was there, he was cool, he died. Like, he is the Mayfly of villains, and I think he deserved better.
He did.
He got it in the Clone Wars. He did, so that's fair. But like,
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean.
I do.
I don't.
But,
I
like,
think it would have been more
obviously-
compelling if they'd kept Darth Maul as a recurring throughout the trilogy. That trilogy, it would have been better.
Burnout.
Especially with
three
like
villain.
Obi-Wan Kenobi and them meeting up again too. Like yeah, exactly. We need that. That is an enemies to lovers situation. I mean, that is a lot going on there.
Star Wars Episode 3.5, the time that Obi-Wan and Darth Maul fucked.
That's on AO3. That is on AO3.
I mean, of course. I'm not. You don't even.
Now.
I haven't even looked. I guarantee you, it is at least like 60 different iterations on it.
I think 60 might be a light number.
It might be, but you know, I'm feeling like I'm playing it safe today.
So, yeah, Burnout, the top 3 villains in my life. I have found myself in the game that I'm working on right now, writing a section that's called Burnout. Because it's what happens when your character's stress maxes out. Saruman the Wise is
interesting. Okay. Yeah. It's true that, like, because really, like, his main role, even in the books, his role is basically to just sort of, like, send an army, capture Gandalf, send an army, and then he was just sort of, like, locked in his tower for a while. And yeah, he went to the Shire and was, like, fucked things up there, but, like, Gandalf had no part of that.
Immediately resolved.
Yeah, immediately resolved.
Saruman is like literally sent to Middle Earth because he's the one studying Saruman. I think, if I'm not mistaken, his job is like
Gandalf
doing research. Oh wait, I thought we were talking about Saruman.
No, sorry. Who are you talking? What are you saying? Sorry.
I was talking about Saruman the Wise.
Yeah. He was
literally sent to Middle Earth to study the big evil tower guy.
Yeah, Sauron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm not
mistaken. Feel like
there's so much there.
I think so. I don't know. I don't know that much about like that aspect of the lore, but
yeah, I think Sauron is a really not Sauron. I think Saruman is very similar names. I think Saruman is a really interesting, like Odds is saying, is a really interesting case in the kind of like villain or antagonist who in trying to like study the enemy or understand the enemy accidentally wound up becoming like a version of
hot
that
take
enemy.
Hot take, and maybe but also maybe a very like ice cold take. Saruman represents cynicism. All right.
Yeah. Now, this is interesting because I just finished a rewatch of Andor, and like Luthen Rael is not a villain. Like he's a rebel. We're supposed to like him, but he also gives such a wild speech um, about what it is that he does and like what it is that he sacrifices for the rebellion or whatever. And I think that there's an interesting difference between those two, in that like a character like Sauron thinks that they are still on the right side, that they are still doing everything right. Um, and a character like Luthen Rael is like, I
I
I do
know
not.
I'm not a good guy.
Yeah, like what's the line I think is I wake up every day to like the solution to an equation that I wrote 15 years ago, and it's I'm damned for what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's yeah. I do like those juxtapositions though of like the villain who is a villain but thinks they are doing right, they are on the side of good, and then the like I mean hero is a hard thing to say, but like the bad guy who does the bad thing because he's trying to do good but knows he's doing the bad thing.
Hmm.
Like I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So, Maggie, this is actually an interesting point because this was something I was going to bring up earlier. Not specifically the Smeagol thing, but like Smeagol was technically a ring bearer, so he could have gone to the Grey Havens with Frodo. Yes. A thing that I was thinking about was this is not so. This is I will do my best to like avoid spoilers for Fantasy High Junior Year, but with like one of the main villains this season, as we learn more about them, like so many of like the the bad kids, their reaction to this person is like, oh yeah, this person's gotta die, we gotta kill this person, we gotta put them in the ground, when I'm here the whole time like, no, this person is in pain and needs to be healed, like this person needs to be healed. And like, to me, especially since like the one who is the loudest advocate for killing this person, for just straight up murking them, is Siobhan, and I'm like, your character's sister, was objectively terrible, but now we're okay with her because we're redeeming her, and like she had to be healed too. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing because like I think, and when you were talking before, John, about like the whole like dystopian utopian kind of like thing, this is kind of where my head was at, right? And thinking about like the idea of like, oh well, sometimes the villain is someone who's in pain and needs to be healed, and that's not everybody's job. It's certainly not the job of the people that they wronged, but somebody needs to help, somebody needs to
Right.
heal them, right? Like, and I think the Smeagol is an interesting one here, right? Where like he got sort of a cosmic kind of justice, you know,
Hmm.
where like his greed for the ring and whatever caused him to not pay attention and slip and fall into a volcano, sort of got a cosmic kind of justice. But if there was anybody in that story who like needed any villains in that story
Yeah.
who needed to be healed, it was
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
Yeah. Like he had done a lot of wrong, and I think the tragedy of that character is that he existed in a world that was not conducive to his to him being able to find a path back to sanity and wholeness outside the
Yeah.
ring. Right. You know, I would argue probably from what the ring represents to Tolkien, to in the context of the story, like Smeagol slash Gollum are like the end result of what happens when you allow this thing to consume, or one of the end results
Yeah.
when you allow this thing to consume you. But like from another perspective, yeah, like it is tragic that this character, this antagonist can't go. They're really,
Mm-hmm.
the Lord of the Rings books really do go, you can go too far to be able to come back.
Yeah, because at a
Yeah.
certain point, like healing is a process that like a person has to choose. Like, so like
Hmm.
there is that. So like there is that aspect of it, absolutely. But I don't know. I think there are some villains who like aren't too far gone, you know. But like the stories that they're in treat them as if they are. And I think it's one of the things that I've always liked about the Doctor in Doctor Who, right? Is that so often like the Doctor tries to like, and like it's not in the like sanctimonious good guy way, right? Where there's like it's like you don't have to do this. We can come to peace because it's the right thing to do. But like in a genuine like I understand you. I understand this and we can fix this together. You know? Like come with me, stop this and we can fix this problem together. It's not a like do the right thing. I know there's good in you. It's like a genuinely like compassionate response to like the villain.
Mm-hmm.
Like he even with like some of his worst villains, the Master, Davros, like he's always like there's no point where the Doctor is not extending that compassionate hand. And I think that's a very like I think that one of my favorite ways of like defeating the villain is like in the compassionate like no, we're
Yeah.
come with me, we're going to heal this. We're going to fix this together. Like, I realize a lot of shit has happened to you. I realize that you've done a lot of shit, but you can still, we can still fix this, you know?
Yeah, like the kind of story. It's like you can choose to do something else now.
Yeah. Like, you chose, at every step of the way, you chose this path. Now, you, just like any other step along the way, you have the opportunity to choose a different one. And, like, that, yeah.
I can feel it coming in the Bad Batch. Yeah, like in Star Wars, I can feel that character arc coming. Like a character who's not really a villain, but who is sort of like gray or like vaguely antagonistic. Like the this whole season, the third season of the Bad Batch, I can feel the that turn coming. Like I've been doing my job. I've been doing these things that I'm supposed to do. My own words coming back to haunt me. Make a better choice.
Yeah.
Yep. Shown with Morgoth in Lord of the Rings. At one point, he is captured and locked away, and the Valar let him go because they don't see him as being past redemption. And he then goes and leads an entire continent and gets locked away again, and is only mentioned as escaping during the end of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Odds. It's offered in an I've been offered it myself kind of way. Exactly. Like it is truly like the compassionate response. And I don't know, I feel like I really admire that when like that is the path to defeating the villain is not to defeat them at all, but rather to like offer them that hand and say, look, you can make a different choice and I will help you. And like I don't know, I think that's it certainly puts a different spin on the superhero ending, which is like the I'm a cop and I'm going to beat you into submission for justice. I'm going to punch you a lot for justice.
Oh God.
Now that I have bloodied your face a whole lot, justice has been served. Problem solved.
Yeah.
Ignore the
true,
collapsing
yeah.
buildings in the background. Yeah.
I think that's why the Avengers is such a, I assume, such a good or interesting choice of, I think that's why the Avengers is such a choice of name. They're so blatant with it. Like, yeah, it's not really about, it's
Punch you
not
so
really
hard,
about
justice will fall out. Punched him right in the justice.
It's just us. Felt that in the justice.
Yep.
Yep.
I don't know. Yeah. We didn't go very far with Nico's question about underutilized villains. I just said Darth Maul, but like I'm sure there are other ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so,
Saruman was a good.
Oh, right. Sorry,
though
yeah.
It did lead to other things, but that was it was a good one. Damn.
I'm trying to think here, because I know that there's been others where I've been like, man, that guy could have been around more.
Oh yeah.
Villains are justice pinatas. Yeah.
Incredible.
lore in Star Trek. Actually, that's a good point. Like, he crops up a lot and then does shockingly very little the whole time.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good one, Odds. Um, and it should be evidence that we agree on that because as our whole channel is named in his favor. So, a rule of law.
Dear good.
Stupid joke. Anyway,
How many times has a topic tonight caused John to take a sip of whiskey?
Freeman's leaving. uh, yeah, everyone's so aghast, and then he doesn't do tons, or at least it's short-lived.
Oh
yeah.
my god, General Grievous!
Yes.
Ah! What an incredibly cool villain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What an incredibly cool villain. Yeah,
Yep.
the writers were like, "Oh my god, we made a super cool like cyborg Jedi hunter," and then we were like, he'll die in a scene.
Yeah.
He has 4, count them, 4 arms. Every single one of them can hold a lightsaber.
Thrawn from Star Wars to a certain extent. I think they're trying to fix that though. But you're right. Even in the old extended universe canon, like he was in like that one trilogy and that was it.
Ahsoka's doing a pretty good job on that front, I think.
Yeah.
in building.
And
him
Rebels
up
did
to
a pretty
be-
good job of it too.
Mhm.
But yeah.
But yeah, he isn't. I suppose like I want to see how they characterize him because he is everything I hear about the character elsewhere in Star Wars. They always speak of him in such grave terms, but I think it's always a hard line to run with like the tactical mastermind
Mm-hmm.
like villain. They have to have something else going
Yeah.
on because if their whole shtick is they're really good at beating people, either it's going to feel unsatisfying when you beat them because you beat them and they're supposed to be unbeatable, or it'll be really, really kind of like frustrating on the part of the audience, or if it's a game, like
Yeah.
the people who are playing,
So-
is like he'll just do bullshit no jutsu and defeat you out of nowhere.
So Nico, I agree with what you're saying, that like Grievous is cool character design and fantasy to him, but really isn't that compelling. And I think I feel the same way. And you say the same with Maul, but I think that's what makes the character an underutilized villain is that he never got a characterization. He
Sort
was
of
just
a chicken and the egg scenario. Like,
Yeah.
is he not a compelling character because he didn't get screen time, or did he not get screen time because he wasn't a compelling character? Like,
Yeah. And I think the thing about villains is that at some point they have to do villainous things. And Maul did that. Count Dooku was just kind of a guy. He was there and he had lightsaber fights with people because he was there, and like also a bad guy because the script says this is a bad guy. But like
Yeah.
Did they kick the dog?
Count Dooku also locked a wizard
No,
in
that
the tower.
like it kicking
Just
the
so
dog
you know.
elevates
you're right,
you
Count
from,
Dooku
like,
did lock a wizard in a tower. You're absolutely
Yep.
right.
He
Yeah.
definitely did.
And he created an army to destroy the world of man, and yeah, so that's
Yep.
fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Right
yeah.
back to Saruman.
Count Dooku is also an underutilized villain. Yeah,
Huh.
I think so.
Yeah.
But I think he also like underutilized in particular in the sense that he never really did villainous things. He was like a villain aesthetic, but like nothing else. He was villain light. He had the trappings of villain, both thematically and physically, right? He said the
Yeah.
villainous lines, but did he actually do villainous things other than like colluding with a Sith Lord? I mean, not really.
Listen, unless it's from the villain section of the writer's room, it's just sparkling villain, and that's what we got with Count Dooku.
Yeah, it's just yeah, exactly. I don't know. I think yeah, but oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of like I know that I had just thought of another villain.
Was it Jar Jar Binks? Because I feel like that was a pretty underutilized
Get
villain arc.
the fuck out of here with that shit. I was never once on board with the whole Darth Jar Jar thing. I'm still not. it was a funny meme, but when people started to take it seriously, that's when it went too far.
I am so Misa pissed. Just so fucking.
Oh God.
Yeah, the only reason he exists is so that Palpatine has someone to convince Anakin to kill. Yeah, yeah, pretty
Which
much.
is a deeply tragic reason for the character to
Yeah,
like what a fucked up like Palpatine is such a fucked up little dude.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Honestly.
even by Sith standards, this guy's pretty messed up.
Good, good. Yeah. Yeah. He's just a weird little guy.
It's really I read about some other Sith and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty metal and you've got a really whole like kind of a goth thing. And then I look over at Palpatine and I'm like, dude, you're messed up. That's not okay.
Yeah, Darth Revan over here looking over like, the fuck is wrong with that guy? Like, I know I said all this shit, but like, him? Or
Yeah.
fucking Darth Bane being like, I know I reinstated the rule of two, but like, that's what it came to. It's like, I'm gonna rethink my whole thing, guys. Like,
Yeah,
I gotta go rethink my entire philosophy.
The Force ghost of Darth Bane comes back and
Like, that guy's
waits
fucked
like
up. Like, it's like that
you
dude's
guys
fucked.
should stop following him. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not telling you to go join up with the Jedi. I'm just saying that guy needs to be like, he's not it. That's not what we the Sith
it's
stand
giving
for.
it's giving Iroh saying, no, she's crazy and needs to be taken down. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. All of the Sith Force go like all of the dead Sith just haunting Kylo Ren, going, please.
I want to know what would happen. What would have happened? I want to know what someone would have created or written up if Mace Windu had been able to take down Palpatine. Would have been more. That would have been very interesting. He should have been able to.
If like Anakin had just listened to fucking Mace Windu and just stayed and waited.
It's just one of literally. Mace
Like,
Windu definitely.
If this bears out, you will have earned my trust, right? Like that. Anakin, there's your in, right there.
And there's exactly. You are going to be a master now. Holy shit! And what is it going to be? The same Jedi Order that it was before? Maybe. No. I don't know. Things are different.
That is a good point though. Like if the Jedi had won, it really would have just been a return to the status quo, which was, as we see over and over again, bad. So like
yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting question. Is that enough of a slap in the face for the Jedi Council to wake up, or do they go back to sleep?
I don't know. I've dealt with a lot of different upper management. Let me tell you. Sorry.
You know what I think would be a compelling Star Wars story? I realize this is like not at all what we're talking about, but I think would be a compelling Star Wars story. And if we were to like set it somewhere, I'd say like Old Republic, or like, I don't know anything about the High Republic, so that's why I'm not saying there, but like Old Republic, like post one of the like big wars, right? And doing the whole thing of like, can the Jedi and their philosophy survive war? Because that's the thing that I think we sort of were cheated out of. Cheated, that's strong words, but we didn't get that we could have gotten, which would have been very interesting in the wake of the whole like Clone Wars thing. Like, can the Jedi and their philosophy survive the horrors of war? And like that would be such a fascinating, like, I would watch the hell out of that. Like an Andor style, but like post-war, right?
Yeah.
I would watch the hell out of that.
Yeah, me too.
Oh god, now I have a different idea for like a Star Wars TTRPG campaign.
They will. Yeah. Okay.
Fuck.
No!
The war is over. The Jedi and Republic emerge victorious, but now the process of rebuilding must begin. But have the Jedi changed too much from the horrors they experienced in war? Like that fucking incredible setting for a
It's a lot of interesting questions that particularly like Ahsoka posed. In talking about how like Qui-Gon was one kind of Jedi and Obi-Wan Kenobi was one kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi set astride 2 generations of Jedi.
Yeah.
And then Anakin is a very different kind of Jedi, and now Ahsoka sits astride two generations in that
Mhm.
she was like raised and taught by the guy who would go on to become Darth Vader, but also like
Oh,
taught by a Jedi who had only known war, and
Yeah.
who taught her very much like how to be a good soldier and how to be a warrior.
Good
oh,
soldiers follow
Um,
orders. Sorry.
oh
Uh,
God,
I'm sorry.
no! Oh, it
I
hurts!
got it.
Oh, it hurts! Oh,
I
it
got
hurts!
it.
Look.
I think yeah.
How dare you? How dare
Ugh.
you? And now Ahsoka like sort of faces the question. Well, like, clearly, Thrawn is here, and that's pretty bad. But like, how do I'm not a soldier anymore. There's not a war.
Mm.
How be
Mhm.
Jedi now?
Yeah.
How be person now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, we are actually at the end of our time. We talked about a lot of things, mostly villains, but not in. We went a lot of different places with this one. I liked this. This is one that could easily have another part to it, but um,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I would love to talk specifically another time about this, about playing evil and villainous characters in tabletop
yeah, we
RPG.
really didn't get to that all that much in this one. We were,
Mhm.
which was, but yeah, that
I
would be
want to be
very
more
interesting.
awake for that because
Yeah,
I have a hot take on that front. And it's
dude,
that
our
people have.
oh, go sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, my hot take is that people have such a difficult time conceptualizing that, mostly because what a lot of people know is D&D, and D&D does not have any tools for player characters being evil.
Yeah,
There are a lot of games where you are playing a bad
Hmm.
person, but it's a good game and everyone has fun. It's just that
Interesting.
D&D is not really cut out for anything.
yeah. I was gonna say, are we? I can't remember the schedule off the top of my head, but are we on for Ramblemancy next week?
If
I'm
you
pretty
like,
sure, yes.
Because if we are, that might be time to part two this conversation and go into TTRPGs next time.
I think so.
Yeah,
that would be
there's
the,
nothing
yeah.
on my calendar that says no Ramblemancy
Okay,
next week.
so then yeah, then I think that let's just decide that now that that's what we're gonna do next week. Is we're just gonna part two this and go specifically TTRPGs and villains.
Yeah,
We did all
I
the
like it.
like other
villains.
media today. We didn't even talk about video games, but I think video games and like it's kind of like the same conversations to have, really. I think, other than specifically calling them out, but I think it's the same conversation to be had. Whereas this is TTRPGs is distinctly different because we're talking about playing
Hmm.
the villainous characters. So I think that's a distinctly different conversation. So I think that's what we're gonna do next time. Um, yeah. Well, everybody, thanks for coming and hanging out. Orange, sorry you came in at the very last second. Good to see you though. Um, we will. You can make sure to catch Tomorrow is Dead, season 2, episode 10. This coming Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific time on YouTube. You can catch it there, the live premiere, and then you can catch it anytime after that as a VOD. And yeah, so next week we'll be continuing this villainous conversation into the realm of tabletop games and playing villain characters. So we'll hopefully see you then, but if not, we'll see you the next time you decide to come roll with us. Good night and good zone, everybody.